Schwab Advisor Services is a proud supporter of the RIA Edge Podcast and independent financial advisors like you. When it comes to your independence, Schwab Advisor Services is all in. They provide industry-leading custody services with no AUM minimums, no custody fees, and digital onboarding for starters. With Schwab, you'll be backed by some of the most passionate folks in the industry with over 35 years of experience helping firms of all sizes. To learn more about everything Schwab can do for you, visit advisorservices.schwab.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RIA Edge Podcast. This is the podcast that gives me the excuse, in fact, the privilege, of speaking to the leaders that are building the growing independent wealth management firms and are doing so with intention. Not simply wafting upwards on AUM appreciation, but as we say around here, growing by design and not by default. Today, it was my pleasure to speak to James Bogart of Bogart Wealth. James started the RIA in 2016 with about $526 million in managed assets, and all organically has built it into a staff of more than 40, overseeing $3 billion in total client assets. So far, he's done this without going to the M&A market, though, as you'll hear, that's likely to change soon. To me, the story here really is that James had almost an instinct from the very beginning to put into place intentional and repeatable processes for growing his firms, whether that was prospecting or marketing, to hiring and educating new advisors. I learned a lot from James, and I think you will too. So without further ado, here's James Bogart. Before we get into how you're approaching growth and how you're organizing the company to take advantage of it, maybe just give us the 101 background on Bogart Wealth, James Bogart and Bogart Wealth, where you started and how you decided to launch your own firm.
Yeah, so I'll try to truncate it real quickly, but came into the industry in 2007. And like any advisor, you got to figure out how to bring in customers. And so I was at a very small broker dealer at the time called Ferris Baker Watts. And admittedly, the reason I went there was they were giving me a base salary and it was the highest payout to be an advisor right out of school. Not saying the rationalization was correct, but that's why I was there. And my dad also happened to work at the firm at the same time. Then in 2008, we actually were acquired by RBC Wealth Management, and that's what created us as a team. And there's a whole chapter of this story that I can get into talking about my dad and I. But it was 2014, left RBC and went over to Morgan Stanley. There's, again, a lot of reasons that went into it, but it was just absolutely a complete cultural shock / not a good fit. And so in 2016, I did the unthinkable, which was 2 moves in less than 2 years, and made the decision to launch Bogart Wealth. And originally I was going to do it without my dad. We decided to do it together. Again, we can get into all of the nuances of that at a later time, but launched Bogart Wealth in 2016. And I'll tell you that second move was the hardest move. So when we left RBC, we had about 600 million, moved to Morgan Stanley, was able to retain 98%. So it was a very successful transition. And then when we went from from Morgan Stanley to go independent, only were able to transition about 73%. So that second move was extremely costly, and I justifiably, understandably so. But you want to talk about a very scary period of time because the financials, pumpkined real fast, and we had litigation with Morgan Stanley. We had a whole bunch of just really bad things happening simultaneously with not transitioning a large percentage of the business. So it was kind of that proverbial gut check moment, and we were very blessed, and this is, kind of the beauty of entrepreneurship, but you have the flexibility to do kind of what you need to do when you need to do it. But we were very blessed to be able to ramp up our marketing efforts super, super quickly as soon as we went independent. And unfortunately, we had this organic machine kicked off very nicely, very quickly. And I was able to bring in enough business in the first quarter of 2017. So we launched June of 2016. First quarter of 17 was able to bring in $218 million in that quarter. And it fully remedied everything that didn't transition. And we were back off to the races. So it's an exciting kind of growth story, but more or less from the brokerage side where I was trained within that broker dealer environment. And made the decision in 16 to go independent. Primarily, I'll tell you, it's just, I'm not a very good employee. I would say I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I also just didn't like the confines of that broker-dealer world where there's just persistent pressure to sell things that weren't necessarily in clients' best interest. And we saw it just with how they were modifying like compensation plans. Like you got a lower payout if you didn't sell X percentage of annuities or X percentage of private, credit or using the banking products. Or, every single month we're having to stop a solicitation for a credit card advertisement to our clients. Just it culturally was very misaligned. And I do believe, the way that our industry is moving is to that true fiduciary standard. Clients are getting a lot more educated as to what the difference is between a broker and an actual fiduciary. And I think that trend is only going to continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger. It's funny, you see how much the industry's changed in the last, let's just say 15 years. I mean, RIAs, I don't want to say that they weren't well known, but they were nothing like what they are now. And I'm going to tell you, I genuinely believe in the next decade, we're going to see RIAs that might even be bigger than some of the broker dealers, just at how much momentum some of these firms are getting. And I think we're going to see a consolidation even to some of the big guys as well. So,
oh yeah, I think so. And you see the money going in that direction for sure. Yeah. I mean, the money's going there.
Without a doubt.
You see the money.
I mean, without a doubt. And I do think that, our industry from a service perspective has inflected as well. Personally, we used to give away the planning in order to get the investments. That was kind of the beginning of my career. Now we're giving away the investments to get the planning. I mean, at a very macro statement, but anyone who's solely just selling an investment solution, they're a commodity and they're going to be fired as soon as they have one bad market experience. I think the most successful RIAs out there are those that are already moving forward with direct integrations. It's the planning, it's the tax work, it's the estate planning, it's the trust work, it's the insurance work, and integrating that offering. That to me is not only how you're creating the most value for your client base, but most importantly, it enhances the stickiness of those relationships. It's very hard to fire your CPA, your financial advisor, your financial planner, your estate attorney, your trustee. I mean, you're talking about stickiness.
Sure.
That's, not only are you enhancing the value proposition for them, but you're making that relationship very, very, very embedded within a customer's life. So
yeah, for sure.
I think,
tell me about this a little bit. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to just say, I think you probably want to hear more about the organic growth story that we've had. A lot of the conversations I've been having for the last couple of years have really been around the success we've had in the last 4 or 5 years. We went from $618 million in May of 2020 to just over $3.2 billion in about four years. And all of that was organic. Not any of it was inorganic. And a lot of it was, growth by design. I've always been, let's just say, very deliberate with my growth story. Since the beginning of my career, I realized, it's hard to bring in clients. And you have to be creating a process around client acquisition. That process really needs to be treated like a pipeline. And that pipeline needs to be nourished. That pipeline needs to be constantly overseen and maintained. And in order to be able to be successful in any of those initiatives, you need to be creating an experience that's extremely bespoke and unique that ultimately makes it so that you stand apart from everybody else. So, going back to kind of the beginning of my career, I realized this. And to me, I'll tell you how we got into kind of the beginning of it. And again, it's not that I think that there was any level of let's just say, intelligence that went into how we started. But my logic was, I want to be the subject matter expert. And again, this was before I understood what niche marketing was or scaling niches or anything of the sort. But I just felt like I wanted to be the expert. And this is, coming back and talking about an early 20-year-old who really did have to feel that like recognition was important. And I had to let everybody know how smart I was. But again, not saying that this was the right pathway on how I started my career. But what I did was I identified individuals at companies and really decided to become the master expert of those benefit programs. And it all started where I literally took the office where I was in McLean, Virginia, and I drew a 15-minute drive around the office. And I said, what companies have large headquarters here or large concentrations of their employees? And I identified 17 different businesses. And then I went through and I started studying the benefit plans for each of those businesses. And the one that I ultimately selected was ExxonMobil. And the reason that I'd selected ExxonMobil was because they had a 401k and they had a pension. And my logic was that even if they messed up saving on the 401k, they still had a pension. So there would be let's just say a target rich environment / every prospect was a qualified prospect for me. And again, remember, I'm 21, 22 years old at the time. So what I started doing was lunches specifically targeting employees of ExxonMobil. And they were all branded that way, where it's like, this is a retirement lunch for Exxon. And I'll admit the reason that I did the lunches was, first off, it's all I could afford. I didn't have marketing dollars. So, I got the employee, I didn't pay for booze, and I was able to be in and out in less than 90 minutes. So I could be very efficient with my time. And that's how it all started, where I was doing lunches at a restaurant that was less than 5 minutes away from their office. Nice restaurant, nice lunch, curated. But it was this, dare I say, pretty generic retirement presentation that I was doing, but I just branded it as ExxonMobil for ExxonMobil employees. And it was
how did you recruit them? How did you find the ExxonMobil and convince them to come to the lunch? Did they let you come into the office there and put up some pamphlets, or?
Yeah, so admittedly, times were a little different than they are now, but the real innovative piece of technology that I was using was email marketing. This is 2007. But this was before Constant Contact or any of those, right? But I just started creating email distribution lists and was able to meet people. I ended up at one point, don't tell them now, but at one point I got my hands on a employee directory. So I was able to then start getting some of the names that way. And again, this is before any of the list services were available for email distribution or phone numbers. Yeah. And that's honestly how it started. But it really was just kind of trial by fire, where we started where I'd have 5 people, and then we get to 10, and then 15. And what I learned was, when you provide value, people are willing to tell their friends. And I was very, very good at asking people to bring their friends. And I think part of it was they recognized I'm young, I'm hungry. I was trying to build a brand and build a business. And they were willing to tell their friends. And what I was doing with these educational events was not solicitatory at all. It was purely lead with value. And at the end, I would always say, if you'd like more information, come in. We do a complimentary plan for anyone who's attended any of our events. And we book them right there at the event. And next thing you know, I was able to again, treat this like a pipeline. But, it started very small and then it got big. I mean, I'll admit now we've got within just that one vertical, we've got well over 15,000 names in our distribution list. Exxon's a big company. They've got over 70,000 employees. But, and I would, I'd say very humbly, I'm proud, but we really do have a brand and presence within the ExxonMobil community. That very seldomly does someone think about retiring from ExxonMobil and not at least acknowledge who we are. And a lot of instances, they'll come in and visit with us. And so then our number one competitor isn't necessarily another advisory firm. It's someone who sees the value in justifying paying for a financial advisor, right? So that's the presence that we have. But it all started with these very generic, basic lunch and learns. And I'll admit, one thing that kind of pivoted along the way was probably 2008, 2009. I had one that just went bad. We only had 4 attendees. And instead of doing my normal talk like I did, I decided to just go kind of more town hall. I said, look, instead of me talking about what I was going to talk about today, why don't you guys ask me questions and let's go deeper, whatever it is you want to talk about. And I realized as I did that these individuals, they wanted more substance. They wanted us to go deeper, more subject matter expert work. They wanted examples. They wanted ways to translate these things to their situations. And the light bulb went off. So instead of doing my generic retirement event, all of a sudden I built this 25 topic retirement planning timeline is what we called it. But it was ones where we actually did these lunches where we went into specific topics. So everything from net unrealized appreciation or NUA to Social Security for Exxon executives, to how to optimize your pension, like all of these different nuances. We built them, and it worked. In 2015, ExxonMobil they closed the office in Virginia and they consolidated everybody down in Texas. We had seen the writing on the wall, so I'd actually been going down to Texas since 2008. But we had built our first presence down there in 2013 when I was at RBC. We had hired our first advisor. And then 2015, Exxon consolidated everybody in their big campus. So all of a sudden, this momentum was taking everything out of where we were in Virginia. And I had to make the difficult decision of, do I follow or do I recreate? And at the time, I was in my, let's just say, late 20s. And I thought, you know what, it'd be fun. I never appreciated what it would actually become. I didn't think that I would all of a sudden be coming down to Texas three to sometimes 4 weeks every single month, because it was just so much volume. But candidly, that's what it ultimately became. But what we did was we ended up having our first advisor down there. And then as I launched the RIA, we ended up opening 2 separate office locations down there, one in the Woodlands, Texas, which is right near the Exxon campus, and then one in Houston. And so that's why we have our current geographic footprint, right? So Bogart Wealth, we've got an office in McLean, Virginia. We've got an office in Woodlands, Texas, and an office in Houston, Texas. And a lot of it's because of the roots of where we came from with this ExxonMobil growth. Next thing you know, we kept growing. By the way, when everybody went to Texas, we found that the lunches weren't effective anymore. So we kept doing that 25 seminar series that we were doing. Email marketing was working fantastic. People were referring their friends. All of a sudden, we found that the lunches weren't working in Texas. So we started doing dinners. And these dinners, admittedly, we're a little bigger. So now we got some marketing dollars. I'd tell you scale really matters. But as soon as we got to the point where we were doing dinners, these were full productions. We were getting 60 to 80 people at every single one of them. And the numbers were compelling, because every event we did, roughly 35% of the attendees were brand new, never came to one of our events. Of them, 65% came in for a consultation, and of those, 87% became clients. So, I come back to that earlier statement I made about having a process around building a pipeline. I got to a point where I was so proud of our pipeline. Our pipeline was as big as the firm was. And that to me was how I was thinking about the future from a staffing perspective, right? Like, if we're going to bring in another, at the time it was roughly 600 million, if we're going to bring another 600 million in, who do I need to be hiring, right? Like, and starting to build the strategic modeling and scaling there.
Yeah, well, that's the question I wanted to get to, right? You said that you went down to Texas with an employee. You had someone down there. Was that at the RBC office? And then when you went independent, how did you make that decision to say, okay, I need to hire either an advisor or a junior advisor or a paraplanner or whatever it might be? What did it look like at the time, and how were you making staffing decisions on?
Yeah. So then it's very different than now, to be candid. At the time, it was mostly me with some support. And then we started bringing in advisors after we had launched the RIA. But when we just did the launch, it was like, all right, I need an admin. I need somebody to sit at the front desk, or I need an advisor who I can start transitioning some of these relationships to. But it was never as deliberate as it is now. But real quick on the story, I just want to add, because in 2020 is when everything changed. So we were doing our live dinners, but when the pandemic happened, the world changed dramatically, even in Texas, where I would say the pandemic wasn't as serious, but the world changed so dramatically that it forced us to go digital. And so March 23rd of 2020 was the first time I did a digital event, but I did not know what I was doing. I know, candidly, it was the first time I ever done Zoom in my life. Everything prior to that was phone calls. And so that first event, we had 397 attendees, and then another 700 people watched the video the week after. Wow. And I understand at the time with the pandemic, we had a very captive audience, but I went from getting 60 to 80 people to all of a sudden getting almost 1,100 on my first one. So what ended up kicking off there was, instead of doing these expensive dinners that we were doing, I decided for the next 2 weekends, and this is again, the world shut down, but to film all of our content. Brought a bunch of suits in, and I did wardrobe changes, and I staged some questions and things of the sort. But that's what built our initial digital media archive. Spent a couple bucks redoing our website, and then all of a sudden everything was digital. So I think I shared with you, we were getting about 20 to 40 leads a month prior to the pandemic. With the pandemic, all of a sudden we were getting 100 leads a week. So it broke everything that we had in place, right? Like we had in 2020, we had 12 employees, and here I am today sitting at 58. So we grew so fast. And a lot of it was in response to that environment. So coming back to your question around staffing, originally we were what I would describe as a practice, right? Like a solo practitioner that was starting to build some Gen 2. I'm young, I'm 40 years old myself. So, it was a different world, but I wasn't being as deliberate because candidly, I thought, I'm so young in my career, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. I don't need to have another tier of advisors. Well, that changed so dramatically for us because the lead flow was dictating where I can't service every single one of these prospects and the clients that I'm working with. We need to bring on other advisors. So I would tell you that a lot of the staffing changes happened in reaction or response to the environment that we were being encountering.
Yeah, so you found this fertile ground for clients in the pandemic in a way, still kind of concentrating on the oil and gas industry, still down there. And I imagine that there was a kind of a, those folks could share these videos either internally or with offices in other states, offices in other countries. So
we're taking it digital.
Pool. Yeah.
So that was it, right? So with going digital, all of a sudden we no longer had, I found three things that came from it. First was we no longer had the geographic isolation or restrictions, right? So if I was doing an event in Houston, Texas or McLean, Virginia, we were only getting people that were in those locations. With going digital, all of a sudden there is no geographic boundary. Second one was you no longer have the people who were, let's just say, concerned of feeling obligated to doing business with you if they had come to a dinner. And there are a lot of those that they just don't want to come and feel obligated, so they never come. But with giving them digital content that there is no gateway or restriction, and they're just seeing that this is an advisor who actually knows their situation and can help them, all of a sudden they're much more willing to come in for a consultation. And then the third, candidly, is that it more or less weaponized our distribution list, because a client of ours is very willing to send the video to their friends. Their friends are willing to send it to their friends. Their friends are willing to send it to their friends. And next thing you know, you are the subject matter expert and everybody's seeing your content. So it more or less weaponized the distribution list. And that's when we were seeing, just the massive, massive growth.
It's incredible. It's a great story. And I imagine early on when you were doing these, as I hear you saying that you tracked this pretty closely, prospects to conversions, how much it costs to bring in a prospect, how much it costs to convert that prospect to a client. Once this explosion happened in the pandemic, were you struggling to keep track of these numbers, or how were you doing it at the time? Was it Excel spreadsheets, or how were you doing your calculations around it?
It's a great question. It was all in Salesforce or CRM. We actually were able to build dedicated pages just for tracking our new business lead flow. We then were able to not only track when the candidate came to at least their first outreach or first event, we were then able to see how long it took for them to be able to actually, by the way, the more we leaned into Salesforce, the better the data got. And I'll admit now I'm a little bit of a data junkie because we're getting even more detailed on some of the things that we're tracking. But you can see, for example, first outreach or first day that they came to an event, followed by when was the first time they had a consultation. We have a 3-step process that we do with all of our new prospects, where they come in for an initial data gathering, we present a plan, and then we do a follow-up. And every single one of them gets the exact same experience. But with doing that, we were then able to now track first consultation to conversion. And we can tell you exactly what that average is. You can get all the demographic data based upon the household. And part of our process is we will bring on someone far in advance of the life event happening, life event being a retirement, life event being a layoff, a death, whatever it is. But we're setting up that relationship far in advance of when we're probably going to actually be, let's just say, meaningfully compensated for it, right? So, we'll open up an account, even if they're going to just give us a $7,000 backdoor Roth or $8,000 backdoor Roth conversion, right? Like we'll set up that relationship, because I have every bit of conviction that as soon as they become a client of the firm, the probability of us getting the rest of the assets at the life event is closer to 99 than it is to, it's closer to 100 than it is to 99, excuse me. So we know with a high level of conviction, once they're a client of the firm, we're going to get the rest of the assets.
So you're willing to bring them in at a point where it's perhaps not as profitable for you to deal with these clients, and because you know that they will become at one point profitable.
That's correct. And with doing a plan for them, we're able to know the timeline of when all of those assets are going to come. Not to mention when you're servicing someone as a client before they become, the meaningful client, they're also very willing to be telling their friends.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Is it your sense that most RIAs are not as deliberate with their prospecting and recruiting client as you were at the time? I don't want you to throw any other RIAs under the bus, and I'm not trying to go with a softball question, but my sense is that most advisors don't do this kind of deliberate marketing.
So the data answers that question, right? You only have 7% of RIAs growing organically. So to answer your question, I would tell you that 7% that is growing organically at all, right? To then talk about, of that 7%, how many of them actually have a defined business development process? And then one that is able to turn it into a process that can scale beyond just the founder. So I would say very humbly, no, I don't think there are many firms that are doing what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And particularly at your size at the time, right?
Well, I'll admit, I did things in that phase of my life that I don't think I would ever do again. It's like I was doing 25 meetings a day, right? Like, not eating, not prioritizing health and wellness, not spending time with my family, constantly traveling. Like, it's stuff now that like I can laugh at and joke about. I give my wife every bit of credit. She supported me when I was doing all of this stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, she still supports me, right? But like, she put up with me putting her through all of that. So yeah, and at one point, I had 450 clients that I was the primary advisor on. Like, so coming back to the question on staffing, like that, gosh, I could spend hours and hours talking about that because we made so many mistakes getting that right. And I would argue, to an extent, we're still tweaking things. But I'm very much of the mindset of bring the business in, we'll figure the rest of it out. And we did. But then all of a sudden it was like, all right, I need to backfill. I need to get individuals in the right seats to be able to sustain these relationships. And what's happened is, I would tell you that we have made, by pretty much every definition, the leap from practice up to enterprise. And as we've done that, all of a sudden, like we had, let's just say, a very horizontal organizational structure to now all of a sudden we've gone very vertical. And now I'm getting pulled into this executive capacity in ways that I never was before. And the challenge there is that, of course, that then immediately takes me away from my ability to service the customers. And so, as we've been making this growth, clients are like, well, this is harming me because I no longer have you, James. I'm like, well, no, you're actually getting more advocacy, right? Like you're getting more support. The organization is growing. We're adding services. And all of that is because I'm in a position to be able to actually run the company. And I think, as we've grown, that absolutely is becoming more and more and more the case.
That you are being pulled into the executive functions as opposed to the advisor or the client.
I'm fully pulled into the executive function at this point, and truthfully, that's where I want to be. But my point more is like the more and more that I'm moving into the executive function, it's putting me in a position to be a much more empowered advocate for all of our clients to enhance the experience for them, and it's actually making us a better firm. And that's been part of the dialogue as we've transitioned these relationships, which is a very hard conversation that I think any advisor that starts to make that move experiences. But when a client starts to recognize, no, I'm actually getting a better service experience because of the growth that they're having, that's when it starts to take a life of its own.
Yeah, interesting.
And we're absolutely seeing that now.
Yeah, no, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. When you were experiencing this explosive growth and suddenly saying, oh my God, I've got to fill some seats here. How did that work? Where did you find the advisors that you hired? And were you in under kind of a pressure sense of, hiring maybe faster than you should have been, or maybe you weren't hiring fast enough given the growth? How did you map that to, finding the best advisors to match the accelerated growth that you're experiencing over here?
Yep. Well, and so the answer is we did not hire them fast enough. And I would say in large part, we were able to endure because I was willing to do what I did. And again, like I said, at one point I had 450.
Take on the 450. Not sustainable.
Like that's just not sustainable. I got really lucky with hiring some rock stars along the way. I mean, I'd say probably my superpower has been hiring people that are so much better than I am in their core focuses. And I got really lucky when we were having this explosive growth to get a couple individuals that came on as advisors from previous firms, previous experience. They were underappreciated, underpaid, and candidly, they saw the opportunity and were willing to make the proverbial bet on me and the growth. And now, I mean, goodness gracious, when I look at where they're at with their careers, it's amazing success stories. And I won't name them, but the one individual will tell you that I've changed their family's life forever. And candidly, that's probably the part that excites me the most now. And like being able to see the tangibility of what the growth actually means. Because it's one thing to grow assets and revenue and EBITDA, but to see the impact that you have on people's lives, that to me is the why of why I continue to do this, especially at the pace that we're doing it and the investments that we're making back into the business. But no, I would tell you, 2022, we got. Sorry, let's go back. 21, we were just waterboarded. Like we did not have the capacity, and we were very reactive, which was infuriating to me. We got lucky with getting some hires coming on board in latter part of 21, and then into 2022 is where we got into stride. Now, the thing is I was completely unwilling to sacrifice on the standard of what our customers were accustomed to. So it made it very, very difficult for us to hire. Like for example, we only hire CFPs as advisors. You can't have a U4 thing in any way, shape, or form, right? So like you think about it, there's roughly 100,000 CFPs. So I've already narrowed the scope down dramatically, and then to add the additional one of no U4 blemishes, like the world shrinks really, really, really quickly. The other thing that I will admit that I came to appreciate though is it's all well and good to hire experienced advisors, but you need to be thinking about the future. So in 2021, we launched the Advisor Growth Track program at Bogart Wealth, which was an accelerated training program for the next generation of talent. And what I was finding was individuals coming out of financial planning programs that had that CFP background, it truncated the learning experience for us so dramatically. Like they already knew what brokerage accounts were and IRA accounts were and Roth IRA accounts were. So it took a whole element of the education and training away that we didn't need to do. But all of these individuals have aspirations of becoming financial advisors, which I think is fantastic. But what I'm finding with this younger generation is they work differently. Every generation works differently, candidly. But with this younger generation, they work really, really well in cohorts, a little less so independently. They also are very task-oriented, not so much results-oriented. And so what we did with Advisor Growth Track is we gave them this cohort experience where we're hiring 3 to 4 of them at a time. So they have little classes or pods that they grow up in together. Then we're building the series of sequences and tasks with on-the-job experience to help make them great advisors. And the whole mission behind Advisor Growth Track is I believe an advisor needs to have competence and confidence to be impactful. Independent of the other, you're actually dangerous, right? So if you are very competent but no confidence, you can't apply what you know. On the flip side, if you're very confident with no confidence, you're dangerous. You'll give bad advice. And so the whole mantra behind Advisor Growth Track is to build empowered and educated advisors that are deeply impactful. And so we launched that in 21. And that was my first attempt at really strategically thinking about the growth so I have the goal of getting to 22 billion by 2033. And when I think about that growth story and how we're going to get there, we need that next generation of talent, right? Like we need to be doing something to deliver that army of advisors to be able to service the client base that we're curating. And these lead flow engines that we've built are fantastic. By the way, I told you the Exxon story. We've now replicated that many, many times into other businesses that we build curated educational offerings for. But these engines are only continuing to get stronger and more momentum. And I think, to kind of back to your earlier comment, it's because we are so deliberate about growth. We are very strategic in how we're thinking about the verticals that we're targeting and how we're going into it. And truthfully, we've got a lot of intellectual capital now in how to build that stuff in a way that creates a tremendous amount of meaning, which is that value creation matrix that I keep talking about.
Yeah. That advisor program, education program internally that you built, was there an inspiration for that outside of the firm at all, or was that something you all came up with yourself? Because that also strikes me as being pretty innovative, even for a mid-size RIA.
Yeah. So it comes back to kind of what you were asking earlier, where we were thinking about staffing, and admittedly, I had a very, very hard time transitioning clients. I still have a hard time transitioning clients, candidly. And I think it's the perpetual just mindset of like, I don't want to say I'm the best, but these people, they signed up with me and they're loyal to me. And if I'm going to transition them,
sure,
the individuals that I'm transitioning them to need to be delivering at the level that I deliver at. And so that was the incubus behind like building that program. Originally, I wanted to call it Bogart University, and we, let's just say, collaboratively ideated that and changed the name. But the concept behind it really was to create a uniform client experience for every single advisor that works for the client at Bogart Wealth. And so the way that we built it, I know I mentioned to you the next generation coming out of the financial planning programs, but we also built it so it could scale with experienced hires. We call them acqui-hires. But there could be a 10 or a 15-year advisor that's coming out of whoever, let's just say Fidelity, for example, where they're great advisors. They know everything about planning and whatnot. But what has made us so unique is the fact that we are subject matter experts. There are very few firms out there that could go toe-to-toe with an advisor at Bogart Wealth for things like net unrealized appreciation, as an example. Like, we know that tax strategy so proficiently and so well. And so the point behind all of this, that's one of a couple examples, right? But like, the point is that any advisor that's getting a client of this firm or a lead of this firm, they need to be as proficient as the person that's next to them, right? And including me, right? So the whole concept behind building out Advisor Growth Track was to have that very deliberate, very consistent customer and prospect experience.
Do you see in that the model is still, to your point of, you had trouble giving up clients because they signed up with you, you were loyal to them, they were loyal to you. Is it still at Bogart a one advisor, one client relationship, or have you moved into a structure of, you want to talk about estate planning or taxes, we'll send you to Bogart Tax, and you want to talk about something else, we'll send you over here. How does it work now?
Yeah, so great question. So the advisor servicing experience is always multi-level now. There's never one person that sits in a client meeting. So that usually I would describe it as seat one, seat two. But then within Bogart Wealth, we've departmentalized everything. So we have an operations department, we have a financial planning department, we have a portfolio management department, we have a marketing department, a business development department, for example. So when a client needs something, they lean on the firm's resources. The advisor themselves doesn't necessarily have to be the expert at everything, and we can pull in that enhancement that the client needs. So be it like tax, for example, we'll pull in our tax resources. Estate planning, same thing. Insurance, like same thing. Some of those, by the way, we're still using strategic third parties because it's just a more effective way of going about it. Like, for example, on the insurance side, like, I don't want to be selling product, so I'll bring in a third party that's a general agent who can completely be agnostic to us, and we still can maintain our fiduciary obligations to our clients.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
But to answer your question, it's firm resources.
Mm-hmm. And at some point, you made the decision to do that in terms of departmentalizing. How early on or late on was that decision, and what did that early departmentalizing look like?
Oh gosh, yeah. So that was very early on for us, and for me, it comes back to this recurring theme of like one firm / one experience. I want every client to be treated like our absolute best client, regardless of size of assets. And I felt more and more that even if you had a different advisor within the firm, that the collaborative resources need to be the same. And so, like, for example, I'll use planning because that was the one that stands out the most. But as we started adding advisors, all of a sudden the plans started looking different, which, fundamentally the assumptions get to the same output, at a high level, but it made it really, really difficult to scale. And it made it really, really difficult to deliver a product that was compliant, right? Like, all of a sudden we've got some advisors using a 7% return number and others using a 5.5% return number. I'm like, whoa, that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, and again, I'm picking on one example, right? But like that was the reason at the end of the day when I said, no, in order to scale this and be able to have the level of volume that we're going to have, we need to have a standardized process. And it was actually pretty early on in our growth cycle when that happened.
So you had either some advisors or some resources that you went toward creating like a planning department and some standardization around the planning, and then advisors could tap into that and use it. Were there services? Focusing I gather on industry executives and in the oil industry early on, later some other industries. Other services that you were surprised that clients were looking for and that maybe led you to this idea of, more of a holistic wealth management experience? What were some of the things that you were hearing from clients which said, oh, I guess we should also think about offering these kinds of services, whatever that might be?
So, by the way, I've been an early adopter of advisory boards. I was doing advisory boards when I was at RBC. The one that actually fundamentally cracked me up, scratch my head, was how many clients resisted tax preparation early on. They supposedly didn't see the value in it. And then I'll admit in 2020, I lost one client to a CPA who was moonlighting as a financial advisor. And that was the catalyst. I'm like, no. I'm never losing a client again because a CPA talked to them about some strategy that supposedly would add value. And that was what kicked me into gear of solving this tax piece. And, when I think about like part of the catalyst for our growth in 2020 and beyond, like that integration of tax, I think was actually a very big part of the growth story when we had that proverbial hockey stick move. To come back to your question, I was surprised at things clients said that they didn't want or didn't see value in. And then all of a sudden, because of some other reason, we decided to move forward with them. And it's been an explosive part of our growth story. I do think, coming back to the comment I was making about the industry, but I do think fast forward 10 years from now, every single RIA is going to look like a mini family office in some way, shape, or form. The service offerings will be different between them. I get that. But the reality of it is that integration is becoming more and more and more of that recurring theme. And I think RIAs, as they grow, it's going to become harder and harder for them to compete with the bigger firms that are offering those services, especially because the cost structure is going to become much more cost prohibitive for the smaller firms to be able to create that type of scale. We're already seeing it.
Yeah, I ask people all the time, why is growth important for an RIA? Why can't an RIA just be satisfied with a handful of clients and doing the work for them? And it's to that point, right? The clients are looking for more services. They're looking for more. They need the more full picture. A small firm won't be able to do it, right? You need the scale to offer the stuff at a scale matters, right? If there's any takeaway from my talk today, I'm a full believer that scale matters. And being deliberate with creating a process around how to build that growth is extremely important. And this is where I think, because I've had that question asked to me so many times, like even within our advisory boards, clients will say, James, why do I care about you growing? I'm like, well, you care about me growing because if I'm not, I'm dying. And I genuinely believe that 93% of RIAs that are not organically growing, they're actually dying on a inflation adjusted basis. They're getting smaller. Right? Like, sure, the headline AUM or revenue might be going up, sure, but again, on an inflation adjusted basis, they're not growing. But most importantly, or an AUM adjusted basis, right? Or on an AUM adjusted or a market adjusted basis. The market.
Oh yeah,
back out the market gains.
If you pull out cap, if you pull out capital markets, they're absolutely declining, absolutely declining. And then depending upon the demographic of the business, like I'm very retirement heavy. So, we've got a percentage of our AUM that we have to replace every single year, no matter what, because our clients are living off of their money. And that's normal, right? That's a big part of the flows that has to be tracked on a consistent basis. But what I was saying is ultimately that if you look at growth and you're not getting to a place where you have the ability to build that next generation talent, and you have the ability to enhance the client experience, whether it be with services or technology, no, I don't think you should be growing just to have bigger EBITDA numbers. That's sure, it's important, especially as you're getting bigger. But I get the reality of it is you constantly need to be reinvesting back into your business. And that's why growth matters.
Makes sense. And you recently brought on board a president.
I did, yeah.
What was the impetus behind that? Again, it falls into this theme of moving practice into an enterprise. How did you make the decision to do that, and how did you decide to divide up the responsibilities? What were you looking for? What does it mean to build out an executive team at an RIA?
So there's a lot of things that went into that decision. I'll tell you, I've become the master of self-actualization and spending a lot of time with coming to appreciate what it is that I'm actually good at and what it is that I really am not good at, and what do I not want to be doing with my time. And what I've come to appreciate is we have grown very much because of having rock star people surrounding me. And I've been able to give the strategic guidance for growth up to this point. What I've become acutely aware of is the day old saying, what got us to where we are is not going to be what gets us to where we're going. And as the organization has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm getting pulled more into this executive capacity, I've had less capacity to actually do any of that strategic planning / oversight / infrastructure development and enhancements. So when I made the decision to hire the president, it was really, by the way, we're an EOS firm. It's an operating system, but I am the definition of the visionary, where I'm very good at seeing the future and anticipating the needs of our clients and the firm and thinking about from a directional perspective the way I want to go. But I've become less and less, let's just say, desired to do any of the integration. It's just not my skill set. It's not what I'm really good at. And that's pretty standard within, where a visionary is not a very good integrator. And I needed to level up what we had on the integration side. So the journey to find the president was an 18-month journey, to be honest. It's a lot of dating, right? Like where you're meeting a lot of people and you go down the road and it's how much do you like the person? Do you want to keep going kind of deal? Mm-hmm. Finding finding Jeff took a long time for me. For me, I look at it as the future very much requires infrastructure, and you need to expand the executive leadership team. I would also tell you it's a big part of the succession conversation. We've got a lot of key man risk with me. We have a lot of key man risk with me, and I'm looking forward to the day when that's not the case. But at one point I owned 100% of the business, and I was the primary advisor and the CEO. And so part of the conversation around expanding the leadership team, and that actually goes even beyond Jeff, to be clear, is from this succession conversation. Like, I don't want something to happen to me, and then all of a sudden, this beautiful enterprise that's servicing all of these households and has all of these employees to be in peril. So that's a big part of the rationalization for how I got there.
Do you think most firms take too long to do this kind of thing, or do they do it too soon? I mean, in other words, and I imagine for each firm it's different, but you're aware that entrepreneurial RIAs sometimes have a hard time letting go.
Myself included.
And sure. It makes sense. And what kind of things did you look at, or if you're tracking the metrics did you look at, or just an intuitive feeling that this was the time to take that step? You say it took about 18 months. Do you wish you started earlier?
Yeah.
If you were talking to another RIA that was like about 10 years behind you, what would you tell them about how they should be thinking about making that move?
Okay, so I hope this comment is not taken as a criticism on any of my team members, because it is not meant that way. But I genuinely wonder, and this is more a criticism of myself, I do genuinely wonder how much more successful we would have been if I had the right president, right person, right seat earlier on in this growth story. There's not a playbook, right? Like there's not a textbook that teaches you, this is exactly what you need to do when you need to do it. And it's one of those things where if you really spend time thinking about, and I'll use me just as the guinea pig here, spending time thinking about how I should have been spending my time. And this is where, I talk a lot about the value of time, talk a lot about how analyzing highest and best use activities. And by the way, I apply this to our advisors as well, because I spent a lot of time doing things that were not highest and best use of my time. If I had the right person that was in that capacity earlier on in our growth story, I can't even imagine how much more impact, more value we would have created in that regard. So, I would say, to answer the question, every firm is absolutely going to be different. And it is extremely hard to let go. And it's extremely hard to bring someone into such a trusted part of the organization. But at the same time, too, it's the best thing for the organization. And it's an empowerment exercise that to go through. And if you get that alignment correct, I'm already seeing it happen, right? Like, it's like I come back from being at a conference or gone, and then all of a sudden, 7 things got completed that previous to having the right people in those roles, all of a sudden, that would have been sitting there waiting for me, not having anything advancing that forward while I was out of the office, as an example, right? So getting that organizational structure and team correct, I've got people on my team. I've got someone who's been with me for, professionally speaking, 19 years. I've known her longer than that. She's one of the best execution people you'll ever meet in your life. But she will admit she is not the strategy person. Like, I have every bit of confidence. I could say, hey, I need this done, and it's going to go get done. But to be able to think about the different steps that need to go into how to get it done, that's not her strength. Right? She pairs up so perfectly with the person in the new president role, because he's able to do that thinking, that strategic thinking, to say, all right, no, we need to put this in place, put this in place, this in place, this in place, and then we go do this, right? And that's for us what was missing. In terms of metrics, I think it's extremely important to watch your metrics where you're able to see what your capacity needs are, where based upon things like client acquisition cost, client lifetime value. Then you look at your EBITDA margin, you look at revenue per professional, you look at revenue per employee. As the organization starts to take on legs where you start getting above these thresholds, it's extremely important to start thinking about the infrastructure that needs to go to sustain the growth. I think everybody thinks about, I need to hire more advisors, or I need to hire another financial planner, I need to hire another business development person or an operations person. They don't necessarily think about the management that needs to go into sustaining that growth. It's pretty important stuff. And just related tangent though, but getting compensation right for those individuals is also extremely important, right? Making sure that they're aligned with the incentivization programs, the correct incentivization programs, to get them aligned so that they're feeling like a key contributor to the growth. And that's the thing that I also see. Biggest regret I have in our growth story was not being deliberate enough with the human capital needs that we've had. We got very reactive very early on, and then we were playing catch up. And what I mean by that is you heard the story about 450 clients, but that's just the advisors, right? But for every advisor, you need to look at what is the support ratio that they need within the operations department, within your financial planning department, within your portfolio management department, right? Because for every client you bring on, you've got roughly 7.1 accounts. Then you've got roughly, you got a money movement, X number of trades. Start looking at all of these in terms of the staffing needs that goes into this stuff. It's oh my goodness, it's not just you need an advisor. You need an advisor plus 0.2% of an operation point person, 0.3% of a financial planner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I could talk a long time about that. I know we're getting up to an hour here, and I don't want to keep you longer. Have you found that those ratios of, I hesitate to call them back office employees because it's not really what they are, but client-facing advisor to employees who do other functions for that advisor and that client, Has that ratio grown or shrunk over time? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I mentioned at one time it was one advisor, one pair of them.
So it's actually shrinking, and the reason it's shrinking is because of technology, and so it's creating new problems for us because that's a great example, right? Like now all of a sudden I need somebody to evaluate technology and how we're integrating it into the business, as an example, and it's gotten to the point where the pace of technology change is happening so quickly, whereas you used to be able to look at this stuff and evaluate like once a year. Now it's a full-time job. There's a new piece of tech happening almost every day now, just as an example. But what's happening is technology is making the advisors more efficient, which of course is then taking away some of the need for other roles. Right now, it is creating new roles, right? So it's just kind of shifting around. But the ratio of advisor to the support for the advisor is absolutely getting smaller. Now, that said, I will also say that the reason that I feel that Bogart Wealth is seeing that happen is because we are so focused in these niches that there's a tremendous amount of uniformity in the prospect to client experience. So for example, I know I've mentioned Exxon, but I'll keep using Exxon, right? But like when an ExxonMobil household comes in, my planning department knows everything they need to be looking for. And then it's a real quick, hey advisor, I'm missing this. And can you get me that, or would you like me to reach directly out to the client, as an example, right? But it's not only where you're seeing that subject matter expertise at the advisor front, but the departments also have it as well, and which makes you tremendously more efficient.
Yeah, makes total sense. Final question, as we look to the future, I know it, wasn't that long ago, 100% owned by yourself. I know you took some investment from Constellation recently to put into the operations. You've done no M&A. Would that change in the future, or what does the future look like for you? What do you think about your relationship with Constellation? What do you want to do with that capital? What's the next 10 years look like?
Oh gosh, can we focus on three?
Yeah,
I'm joking.
Yeah, sorry.
No, so Constellation has been phenomenal as a partner for me. The capital primarily is for growth. I've mentioned technology already. We've been making a tremendous amount of investments back into the business. There's no doubt that M&A is going to be happening for us. This war for human capital is only continuing to get worse and worse and worse. I had for the longest time, I had the mindset that M&A would not be value added for us or accretive for us. And a lot of that was because we've been growing so quickly organically. I ran the process myself. I actually ran a change of control process in 2023. Happy to spend time on that at some point in the future too. But as I ran that process and then moved into the capital partner process, I became acutely aware of why these bigger firms were acquiring other firms. And a lot of it wasn't just the assets, it was also the human capital, the talent. And so for us, we're definitely going to be doing inorganic, and frankly are already in conversations with multiple firms for acquisitions. But it's one where we're very selective on who we're talking to. We want firms that want to be a part of the growth story. I mean, I would tell you that I think Bogart Wealth's in our first or second inning of the life cycle of where we're headed. And I think a lot of it is if it can open up a new opportunity, a new niche that we can apply our intellectual capital onto, and then be tremendously additive with the additional expansion of services, that's a perfect opportunity to allow an advisor to be the advisor that they are, and let us help them expand the outreach that they've already got. But to answer your question, in the next 10 years, $22 billion by 2033. So obviously that's 8 years now. But there is going to be an inorganic part of that conversation, just as much as we're going to continue to lean very heavily into our organic engines.
That's fantastic. James, I've kept you too long. I apologize.
You're fine.
Thank you very much for this. It's been a fantastic conversation. I think people learned a lot. So a great insight into what you're building there at Bogart Wealth. And we're going to keep watching and we'll keep talking.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Schwab Advisor Services is a proud supporter of the RIA Edge Podcast and independent financial advisors like you. When it comes to your independence, Schwab Advisor Services is all in. They provide industry-leading custody services with no AUM minimums, no custody fees, and digital onboarding for starters. With Schwab, you'll be backed by some of the most passionate folks in the industry with over 35 years of experience helping firms of all sizes. To learn more about everything Schwab can do for you, visit advisorservices.schwab.com.